I love when once in a while something from the Transformers' past and its development history surfaces after many, many years. And just when you think you've seen it all and every little piece of information or sketch or behind the scenes footage or anything like that has been seen, has been published, has been on a DVD extra, more of that surfaces, and it just gives us a better understanding of what could have been or how our lines could have developed or how they are developed. And we got some great ones here from a very, very, very talented person from not only within the Transformer community, but creatively within the Transformer brand of Don Figueroa. Now, Don has been in the Transformer community long before he was professionally working in it. He was one of those very talented people in the early days of DeviantArt, showing all his original Transformer art, all his original Transformer creations, his own comic book, The Macro Masters, and even he would hand create original Transformer toys and take photos of those and share those too. One of his most glorific, like one of the most amazing ones he's ever made was he made a huge city former called Stronghold, and it was actually made by hand, this Transformer, and it was like almost double the size of a G1 Fortress Maximus. I think it was like 40 inches tall, which is like 3.5 feet. You know, it was huge, absolutely huge. You could probably find that on Google somewhere. But yeah, like he was a super talented dude. And when Dreamwave started getting the license for the Transformer comics, he was brought on board. And then Hasbro brought him in to do a lot of the Transformer Armada package art in the second half of the line. So like you could know him for all like, you know, the iconic Unicron art. That was Don Figueroa. The Tidal Wave, Galvatron, Nemesis Prime, those were all him. And he would go on to do others too. He'd do Energon and a whole bunch of others too. But it was Aaron Archer who noticed, oh, like this guy's not only just an artist, you know, he's also a designer. Like he knows how to design and make these Transformers from scratch. So he has a good 3D, you know, kind of space thing going on. And he was given the creative helm of the Transformers Titaniums line. And this is what we're going to be talking about today, because Don Figueroa on his Twitter account, you could check it out. He has tons of amazing stuff on there. It's Sketchy Fig on Twitter. Don posted a whole bunch of never before seen behind the scenes sketches and concepts of some unreleased Transformers Titaniums figures. Now, we got to see these figures in their prototype resin form many years ago at BotCon 2007 during the Hasbro tour. But this is the first time we've seen these sketches because it gives us an idea of the coloring of how these figures would have been. And a lot of just, well, what would have been some of our very first G1 figures in a very long time. Now, all of these come from 16 years ago, a lot of this stuff. So it's really cool to see it surface. And, you know, Don, he was given the Titaniums line. He really was like, you know, he was given carte blanche. He could do whatever he wanted on that line. And, you know, he was coming off of his critically acclaimed Transformers War Within comic book series, which is still fantastic to this day. If you have not read it, go out of your way to find it. And with all that freedom, he put a lot of those Transformers Titaniums designs in the line, as much as other things too. And the reason why he had that freedom was because he was given the Titaniums line to do the 6-inch figures. But they pretty much said, look, all we ask is do these trademarks. These trademarks are going to expire and we want to keep them fresh, or we want you to use some of these characters because they're key characters. Use these. What you do with them, that's your concern. You could do whatever you want. So that's why we ended up with like Beast Machines Cheetor instead of just like, you know, a classic Beast Wars Cheetor, because he was like, I want to do the best Beast Machines Cheetor toy we could ever get. And I mean, honestly, up to this point, probably still is the best Beast Machines Cheetor toy when you really think about it. All those years ago, 16 years ago, man, imagine. You know, he gave us RID Optimus Prime, which he could have done one of many different Optimuses. He wanted to do that one. There was a lot of really creative stuff. Even his Rodimus that he did was based off of the Studio Ox Rodimus design. So he even went with that kind of visual cue for Rodimus. So a lot of cool stuff, but this line gave us like our very first pre-Earth intended Cybertronian designs. This line gave us our very first G.I. Joe crossover figure with Megatron, our very first Fallen figure, our very first tape Soundwave figure in decades. Like, this line predates classics, it predates universe and generations. This really was, in a lot of ways, the very first kind of classics kind of line, even though it was that weird heavy metal kind of Titaniums aesthetic and design. But he did a lot of crazy stuff, and he showed off on his Twitter today what would have been the final designs, how the transformations would have worked and everything for the unreleased Arcee, Generation 1 Arcee specifically, Generation 1 Shockwave, and a War Within Bumblebee. Now, again, we saw these prototypes in person in the cold resin and the prototype resin, but we never got to see how those transformations work. And these sketches show everything. Again, it's all on his Twitter account. Again, Sketchy Fig on Twitter. Pretty cool stuff. And the Arcee is important because that would have been, if that figure would have came out, that would have been our very first Generation 1 Arcee figure that would have got released after many, many hiccups. I mean, yeah, we got like PVCs and statues up to that point, the SEF PVC line. They gave us the MC Axis statue line, but never a transforming Arcee figure in retail. This would have been the very first one. And it is what it is. Within the confines of the limited budget that the Titanium 6-inch line gave us, he did a pretty good job in all things considered. And you get to see how the transformation would have worked and the articulation and the joints. Pretty cool stuff. His Shockwave, again, kind of the same thing too. It's like, hey, it would have been like our first gun Shockwave in forever. Because, yeah, at the time we were also getting Shock Blast in Energon, or Laser Wave as he was called in Superlink. But what's cool is because it shows the color scheme this time, as opposed to the resin prototype we only saw at Hasbro's head office, you get to see how they were able to get around the gun mode, where his forearms were going to be this yellowish kind of color scheme that when he transformed, it led to a yellowish orange kind of barrel. So it also showed how they probably would have gotten around that. And of course, a War Within Bumblebee. About 50% of the Titaniums line is War Within designs. You got War Within Optimus, Megatron, all the Seekers. I mean, Starscream, Skywarp, Thundercracker, even Sunstorm got one. They did a Grimlock, which I think is fantastic. They did a Prowl. They did Jetfire. Of course, the Fallen was in that because that was part of the War Within sequel. We even got an Ultra Magnus repaint. There was like a ton of War Within characters in that line, and Bumblebee would have been no exception, and we would have gotten our first ever. Imagine all these years later, now we finally have like stuff like, in the Transformers War for Cybertron video game generations line, we got a Cybertronian Bumblebee. And then only recently through Bumblebee, Buzzworthy Bumblebee, we got our Buzzworthy Bumblebee Origins Bumblebee. But imagine, this would have been in a lot of ways our very first kind of hovercraft, Cybertronian Bumblebee would have been right here, based off of that War Within kind of design that's inspired by that More to Meets the Eye episode, part 1 of Generation 1, 1984. So pretty cool stuff. And that one, also, there was plans afterwards to do a Cliff Jumper repaint of that Bumblebee design. And there was even going to be a Cosmos. Like, we never even got that Cosmos one. That would have been our first, Cosmos figure also in decades. And that design was pitched and it got rejected. And it did get kind of to a prototype phase, and that was just it. And I think they were going to use that design afterwards in Classics because Don also went on to work on Classics, and he designed like a whole bunch of those Classics figures from that initial wave. And he pitched that one that also got rejected, and we wouldn't see a Cosmos figure until I think like 2008's Legends line, Universe line in the Legends scale. And then we got him in the Legends 2-packs with Payload, which then got reissued in Titans Returns, I believe. And that was it. I mean, that was it. Maybe a Creo figure here and there, and that was it. I mean, now we're getting, supposedly in the Velocitron Walmart exclusive line, he's going to be a deluxe class. But, man, even Cosmos had a weird history. But, I mean, that's what's crazy about looking at these because, like, this line, Titaniums and these sketches that he's showing really show us, like, what would have been and what would have, at a time where we didn't have a Classics line. We didn't really have a Masterpiece line in its full form yet. Yeah, we had like, MP Optimus and a few other characters that were just, like, oh, we just got Starscream. We just got Grimlock. But this is crazy. This is like, it's so cool to see this kind of stuff, especially, 16 years after the fact, when you think that we've seen everything that we could have of this line, and who knows what else will surface. Again, I heavily suggest following his Twitter account. He posts a lot of really cool stuff on there, and he's a very talented dude. And I mean, hey, like, he would go on to do like so much other crazy stuff. Literally, there's a character in the 2007 Michael Bay Transformers movie named Figueroa as a little nod to him. That's how talented he is. But check out his stuff, and I mean, it's really cool. You know what? I want to mention one more thing. It just popped into my head. Don was so smart in one way, because he's one of the very first retail Transformer designers, if not the only that I could think of across all toy lines, that has actually signed an action figure with his signature. If you pick up your 6-inch Titaniums War Within Optimus Prime, on the barrel of the gun that comes with him, it's signed Don on it, like how he writes Don when he signs his art. So he's pretty smart. Usually you don't see toy designers putting their signatures on toys, especially in retail. But he knew what he was doing. Anyways, guys, let me know what you think about this. It's pretty hype stuff. I really like this behind the scenes kind of stuff, and like what would have been our first RC figure in a lot of ways. So pretty cool stuff.